We are how we fill our space. If we care, our use of space will be noticed, considered, and remembered. Let me say that again. We are how we fill our space. Thought, sound, and form define it. If we care, our use of space will be noticed, considered, and remembered. For sculptor Craig Frederick in the city of New Britain, Connecticut, the use of space is something they care for deeply. After all, when we look at past cultures, when we study the clues they left behind, it is their use of space, mostly their art and architecture, that tells us about their existence, their values, and how they felt about their own culture. I'm Warren Bird, and we are about to take a look at the work of my friend sculptor, Craig Frederick, through the development and making of his piece, Home, a monumental public sculpture commissioned by the city of New Britain, Connecticut. For Craig, the process of developing sculpture starts with observation, life experience, and reflection. His studio is where he begins the physical work of orchestrating elements through numerous drawings and three-dimensional wire sketches.
The studio is more than a shop with the space, tools, and materials to make sculpture. It's a safe place, almost sacred. I can take the risks I need to take. It's an environment that allows me to focus, think clearly, a place for intense meditation. How we interact with our world is a result of how we perceive it. Senses give the brain information it needs to help the whole body survive. This information can be excruciating, exhilarating, and anything in between. I'm interested in how the things we see affect our intellect and emotions, in particular those things that elicit a visceral reaction. Line moving through space is a difficult visual for the mind's eye to grasp. Two-dimensional images are much easier. I use a couple of methods for working out how I want a form to sit in space, how I want its lines to move. The great thing about drawing three-dimensional images on paper is that nothing is as it appears. Deceptive techniques such as foreshortening imply 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. You can draw the impossible. Allow your imagination total freedom from any physical limitation. I draw a lot. It's peaceful and it helps me focus. When it's time for me to study how a line is really going to behave, I draw in 3 dimensions with wire. The resulting maquettes are little more than quick studies, but give me tremendous information from which to proceed. I have even focused on a series of sculptures that are finished versions of these studies. They give the eye a lot to work with, while very little material is actually used. They work because before anything else, sculpture exploits and activates space, and the eye reads the definition of space as much as it reads the form.
Except for a few. Most small to mid-sized New England cities don't have employees or committees charged with the job of commissioning public art. When the city of New Britain, Connecticut made the courageous decision to use public art as a focal element in the redesign of its downtown, Mayor Lucien Pavlak turned to the city's Department of Public Works.
A few years ago, the city of New Britain underwent a road reconstruction project. In redoing the downtown area, it created a vacant patch of green. Through involvement with community residents, neighborhood businesses, and church members, the opportunity for artwork to be located on this patch of green was discussed. As a result of that idea being hatched, the process of selecting a piece of public art became real. The City of New Britain has since created a request for proposal process that is preparing the city to commission a piece of public art. Having mailed the request for proposals to over 200 New England artists, a committee made up of 15 area residents, businesses, and church members will consider the concepts and proposals by the artists who choose to submit their work. Some of the aspects to be considered by the committee will be budget and scheduling limitations, artistic concept, visual impact on the site, and the artist's experience. Significant emphasis will also be placed on the maintenance and durability of the proposed work of art. The selection committee is looking forward to the types of proposals that will consider what the city has been and where the city of New Britain is headed. And so as artists develop their concepts, our concern will be that they capture the essence of our community and the future of our city.
The specific concerns outlined in the request for proposals make it apparent that this will be a particularly involved and difficult design project. The selected site can be seen from many directions and from great distances, requiring a large, impressive form. It is also close to pedestrian sidewalks and building facades, lending itself to a very open and airy form, as opposed to broad, heroic surfaces.
Instead of using wire or round rod, this time I'm using small strips of bronze plate to examine 3-dimensional line possibilities. Because the strips are square to rectangular in section, the eye follows the turning edges and silhouette lines as much as it follows the path of the whole form. Depending on how light hits the piece, the resulting light and contrast between the 4 sides also help to accentuate this. The project is what we call site-specific, and one of the city's concerns is whether or not the sculpture is going to affect traffic sight lines or surrounding architecture. So I've made a scale model of the intersection where the city has chosen to place a piece of sculpture. And this enables me to study designs that I've produced in the actual site, see how they'll affect the entire site. And photographing these designs in the site model also gives the city a good idea of how the finished project will look.
There's been a selection of a piece of artwork that will represent New Britain's past and its future, and will honor it. The piece of sculpture is called Home, and in fact, it has been designed and will be created by a local artist, someone who is familiar with the city of New Britain and with whom the city of New Britain is familiar, Craig Frederick. And so we thank the individuals involved for taking the time and for really making the selection process a model for future efforts of this type.
Once a commission has been awarded, there's much more than a work of art for the artist to consider. Lawyers, finance directors, contract negotiations, subcontracting for fabrication, engineering, transportation, installation, insurance, landscape design, and the list goes on. Though each demands significant attention, for a project such as this to be successful, an artist has to separate the business of art from the art itself. Craig's first task is to make a 3-foot model from the original 2-inch maquette.
This scale model is what the foundry needs for me to give them before they can upscale to 12 feet tall. And my first problem was to define this 3-dimensional line in space, hitting every coordinate, 3-coordinate system, X, Y, Z, as perfectly as possible. As a graceful 3-dimensional line through space, I need it to be unbroken. With a little adaptation of a tube bender and using my body with the bender and my hands on the tubing, I was able to produce very graceful 3-dimensional bends to the tube. The other benefit of the EMT was that it comes with hardware that's designed to hang the EMT from walls or ceilings. And the hardware that I used are called EMT hangers. And they're placed on the EMT through here every 2 inches. And what I'm doing is taking templates of screen and attaching them to the form with little binding wire to the welding rods. And then I'm trimming the screen right to the form, and that's working out very well. And what this provides us in the armature is it triangulates everything, giving the line a lot more structure. It shows the final form, the rectangle around that line, and it gives me a final substrate to which I can apply Bondo, auto body putty, which will be my final surface. I almost always return to the human figure for information and inspiration. Similarity of line, form, and movement is everywhere, constantly approaching an elusive linear order, yet never repeating. Equally captivating is the poetry of physics. Much of what I draw comes from the time I spent watching water and its curve. There are no finer forms than those of nature. The purpose or resulting inference from some of my pieces may seem to have little to do with the figure or any other natural form. However, these are the roots from where I have derived my own sculptural language and by which I am continually inspired.
With its ability to carve through anything in its path, water also plays a functional role in the next stage of making a home. After template patterns are made from each side of the 3-foot Bondo model, new templates are produced 4 times larger. These patterns are the shapes that will be cut out of the stainless steel from which the full-scale sculpture will be fabricated. For each 3/16-inch thick plate of stainless steel, a plot of these patterns is inputted into a computer. With this information, the computer guides an ultra-high-pressure water jet that shoots a stream of water and abrasive straight through the metal plate. The entire series of cuts are made without any torches, plasma arc cutters, or saw blades. Though the water jet progresses slowly, the results are perfectly cut and indexed pieces of stainless steel. The pieces are shipped directly to Talix Incorporated, a well-known fine art foundry and fabrication company in Beacon, New York, where they will be assembled and formed to the full-scale sculpture. Rough fabrication will take nearly 3 months to complete. The fabricators start by connecting many of the pieces that make up each side of the sculpture. Making certain that all angles are accurate to the 3-foot model, all 4 sides are carefully tack welded together. This is, by far, one of the most difficult and time-consuming stages of the entire process. There is little room for error, as even a minor deviation at any juncture will produce a major gap a few feet forward away from that point. As the fabricators, Andy and Chris, progress and the home begins to take shape, Craig makes frequent visits to oversee the project and to assist in problem-solving difficult transitions throughout the sculpture. While both Andy and Chris are expert fabricators with years of experience, they recognize that nobody knows the intricacies of this particular piece as intimately as Craig. It is their combined talents and respect for one another that makes for a successful project, a well-constructed sculpture that is true to the artist's original design. As quickly as problems are resolved, new ones arise. As it is, the process of fabrication is tricky enough, but to produce graceful, unbroken, 3-dimensional lines in this way is extremely difficult. Due to their very subtle changes, it is the apparently simple lines that often prove to be the most challenging. Having made it beyond the dramatic curves, Andy and Chris find this to be true in the final leg of the sculpture. A discrepancy between the sides has to be corrected with major surgery and reconstruction of the original plates. Chief fabricator of this project, Andy's resolve shows that he is a true master of his craft. Ultimately, they make it past this section and finish the last of the tack welding. Before the sculpture is zipped up with continuous welds, Craig examines the lines for final tweaking of the form. Some of the seams have to be reopened and spread apart, while others need to be trimmed. A plasma arc cutter is used to do both. surfaces are also examined for high and low spots. The lows are pulled out and the highs are hammered back in. Craig will further refine the lines and surfaces when it is time to grind and finish the sculpture. When Craig gives the foundry his approval of the form, the fabricators prepare the piece for final welding. Andy uses a die grinder and a stone disc to cut trenches along all the seams. This ensures that the welding will penetrate the plates with enough new metal to keep the connection strong. Last-minute fabrication work by Chris includes the making of the sculpture's footplates. Each foot is welded to the inside of the piece and will be bolted to individual concrete footings already placed at the site. At last, the piece is ready for Craig to complete. In the next 7 weeks, he will have well over 300 feet of stainless steel welds to grind, sand twice, and finish. His friend Steve gives a few days' labor to help keep the project on schedule. With barely a day remaining, Home is strapped and hoisted out of the foundry onto a truck. Its dimensions make it the largest piece that Talix has ever shipped whole. Though certainly stranger things have traveled in New York and Connecticut highways, Home gets its share of looks as it makes its way to New Britain. Arrival and installation of the sculpture is a tense yet exciting time for Craig and many of the other people associated with this project. Final preparations for the official unveiling and celebration of Home include street cleaning and last-minute landscaping.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of my husband, Mayor Pavlak, I welcome you to the unveiling of Home. And what an appropriate title Home is. New Britain is proud to have one of her own in Craig Frederick, who created such an inspiring work of art that brings to heart what we are all about. To thousands of people around the world, New Britain will always be home. To the children who have left and to the newcomers, New Britain carries a pride of memories and dreams that compare to none.
Oh yeah, they're gonna read poems they wrote.
Oh, nice.
About home, of course.
Home. Home is where the heart is. Home is where my family is. Where I feel safe to sleep at night, home is where I'm happy.
My home. In my home I can find love. In my home I can see my family. In my home I can be warm. In my home I can be safe. Mi casa. En mi casa puedo encontrar amor. En mi casa puedo ver mi familia. En mi casa puedo estar caliente. En mi casa puedo estar asegurado.
This piece, being a site-specific piece, had an awful lot to do with it that had to do with the neighborhood. And it sits at the very beginning of Arch Street. So I wanted it to have archways involved in the form. But as far as the city goes, the piece is designed so it's a line that comes from two different directions, travels very windy, curvy paths, and they end up together in this circle. And that was supposed to be representative of different cultures traveling different paths through life, finding themselves here in New Britain in a place that they call home. Look at it with your eyes as you would listen to music with your ears. I ask people, if you're listening to a great jazz piece that doesn't have any lyrics, do you say, what's this about?
Yeah.
You allow yourself to have a visceral response to music because music's always around us. We're very used to it.